Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. City Council member David Yassky represents the Brooklyn neighborhoods of Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Vinegar Hill, Dumbo, Brooklyn Heights, Boerum Hill, and Park Slope. All old Brooklyn neighborhoods with new people suddenly have become the center of glamorous city life. I love listing those names, the neighborhoods.
Well, I love working for them. And you're right, they are full of a lot of new people. A lot of people have been living there for generations as well. Right. But the way these neighborhoods have changed in the last 5 or 8 years is pretty astonishing.
What's happened? Is it people moving? I mean, where are these people coming from? Are they coming mostly from Manhattan? Or out of the city? If they're moving into the city, they go to Brooklyn now?
Well, it's two things. Partly it's people moving from Manhattan as housing prices have become just, absolutely unreachable. And partly it's people coming to New York for the first time who would, in 10 years ago, 15 years ago, have moved into Manhattan. Somebody coming to work at an advertising company or one of the banks. But instead of Manhattan, they're now locating in Brooklyn.
So it presents a challenge because Manhattan has priced itself out of the market.
Right.
And now the next target is Brooklyn, is your part of Brooklyn, or I guess other parts of Brooklyn maybe too, and some parts of Queens. But they're moving in, they're raising the general level of income, and prices are going to go up.
And
right?
the general level of housing price, which, it's certainly not limited to my neighborhoods, as you say. It's throughout Brooklyn. And this is, look, it's good when neighborhoods improve. They're safer. We're sprucing up the parks and developing the waterfront, and more people want to come live in a neighborhood. That's a good thing. But it creates a real challenge. Throughout my district are people who could not afford to buy the home they live in if they had to buy it today.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's true maybe of the bulk of my constituents. Now, that just raised some real issues. I mean, it means, first of all, their children can't raise their family in the same neighborhood as the parents because they won't be able to buy. They can't buy a home there. It means that if people have to move out for one reason or another, they often are uprooted from the neighborhood. I think affordable housing and creating more affordable housing is one of our top 2 or 3 goals.
I was going to ask you what you thought were the most important issues, and affordable housing is certainly...
Affordable housing is definitely there. And, we're actually doing some terrific things there. We just reached an agreement with the mayor a few weeks ago on a development plan for the North Brooklyn waterfront. I'm talking about from the Brooklyn Navy Yard to the top of Brooklyn, where we're going to rezone so that people, now that's factories and warehouses, but they're empty. I mean, look, for better or for worse, I wish we still had those jobs, but we don't.
But as you've explained, every block in the city is zoned. It's either zoned for manufacturing, commercial, or residential. Some of them are zoned for both commercial and residential. You're talking now about the Brooklyn waterfront between Williamsburg and
Greenpoint, Williamsburg, basically.
Which was basically
that's zone
industrial.
Industrial, zoned for manufacturing. So until a couple weeks ago, you couldn't put up an apartment building on the waterfront or even several blocks inland in North Brooklyn. We changed that, so now people will be able to build apartment buildings and residential housing. Now, that's good, but what we also did, and to me, this is really path-breaking, we built into the zoning that the developers, if they want to take advantage of this change, have to include affordable housing, either as part of the building, or they can do a market rate building here and then an affordable housing building a few blocks away.
But in the same area.
In the same neighborhood. And what that means is we're creating
You're ensuring
opportunities
an integration.
and for the folks that have been living in the neighborhood for generations to stay there. Otherwise, they're just going to get forced out.
Well, a lot of people will get forced out. I mean, isn't that what happens? I mean, that's what's happened in Manhattan. The prices go up, people move. They're going to move to Brooklyn. The price is going to go up, and people are going to move someplace else. I mean, we read about working people living in the Poconos and commuting to New York, which is so astonishing, but the prices for a house are so much lower. Sure. But go back to your inclusionary zoning, because I was very struck by that in the plan. I think that's very important. We've had what we called inclusionary housing, right? Where if a builder built 80-20,
yes,
they would get what kind of tax assistance? A low interest rate on the
Right.
mortgage?
That's basically what it is. You get a low interest mortgage
for the length of the mortgage.
and you get some cash subsidy besides by basically you get some cash subsidy besides. But here's the thing.
But you were able then to do 20% housing off-site, totally in a different neighborhood.
You know what? There are different programs. Some allow you to do it in a completely different neighborhood. And some you have to do it in the same building.
Right. But you have a flip side of this plan, don't you? That if the developer doesn't opt for the 30%, is it affordable housing?
It's 20% for the private developers.
But if they don't opt for it, do they lose some of their development rights?
They lose a big part of it. That's really...
That's the big distinction, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really, in fact, that's what means it's really going to happen. We've had some inclusionary zoning programs in the past that have not generated much housing.
Right.
Here, the developer has effectively no choice. If they don't do the affordable, they lose almost a third of their right to build. And
in
they
height
lose,
of the building.
In height.
It's interesting.
And they lose tax subsidies besides. So there's no doubt in my mind that developers are going to choose to do it. And what that means is, we don't have $2 billion a year to spend on a new Mitchell-Allen program. That was the housing program in the 70s. It created a lot of the middle-income housing. So if we want to have a middle class in New York, which I think we do, and I think most New Yorkers believe is important, if we want that, we have got to come with a more creative way to do it. Using the zoning, to me, is a more creative way to do it because what it does is it takes these development rights that the city has, and instead of giving them away for free, you make a deal with developers. Say, you get to build, you're going to get plenty of profit from the market rate apartment. The price for doing that is you also have to do some affordable housing.
It's a very interesting thing because otherwise you lose, I mean, it's the flip side, I think that's the most important. You lose those development rights because the old plan, you got certificates or you did whatever, it became like the commodities market for me. One developer would sell to another developer and it didn't get built in the neighborhood, which is where it's so important to integrate the incomes because then you get the balanced schools, or maybe balanced schools and a whole healthy neighborhood.
Yeah, part of it is keeping the affordable in that same neighborhood. Yeah. But the other part is just offering the subsidy. That isn't even going to generate apartments no matter what because the difference between the affordable rents and the market rate rents is so great that developers will just say, okay, forget about the subsidy program.
I'm going to do it.
I'm just going to do all market.
But if he loses 30%.
If he loses right to build.
So what is an affordable housing rent? Or price?
It depends on family, but for something. And I actually think we want to rent for we want to provide housing, for low income and also for middle income because otherwise we're gonna lose those families. So that can be up to a $90,000 a year salary for a family of four, which in New York City, we've got to make sure that family can afford to stay here. A teacher, a police officer. They're going to be priced out.
But don't we find more and more, though, we have two people earning livings in families, and so the income for middle income, or if you're talking about a middle class, $90,000 isn't necessarily going to be two professionals.
No,
a teacher and a policeman.
Look, a teacher and a police officer that are married or that are to form a household together, they are going to be over that, and so be it. But look, we want to at least.
It's a move. It's a very big move.
You want to at least do what you can.
Try to attempt something. Yeah. So you're going to have parkland and you're going to have a promenade.
That's right. All along the waterfront.
You chair the waterfront committee.
Yeah.
The waterfront committee in the council. Was this project a result of that, or as being the council member, it was a marriage of the two interests?
Well, this one worked out nicely because it is. Look, it happens to be, I represent the district, but it also is the best waterfront revitalization opportunity that the city has. And I don't think it'll be the last step. I think it'll be the first step. We can do this in Queens. We can do this in the Bronx. Take some of the industrial waterfront that just isn't being used anymore and make use of it, so that folks who live in the city can get some use out of the waterfront.
Is there someone doing overall planning of the waterfront? Is the city planning, Department of City Planning, is the Port Authority still interested in developing the waterfront? Who is? We
worked very closely with City Planning on this, and I think they did an excellent job. I don't think you have enough of a vision for the future that people are, are pushing. I think the Olympics still, in this administration, let's be honest, I think the Olympics and securing the Olympics and then building the sites for it is an overriding goal. And I'd like to be able to say, let's just plan for the waterfront for what's best for the city, even apart from that. I'd love to get the Olympics. I actually would. I know some people, there's a division of opinion there. I think it'd be very good for the city.
Well, you live in Brooklyn.
You
got McCarran Pool or something, right?
But I don't think, no, I think it'd be good for the city. But, you can't, we do rely on being the capital of the world in a lot of ways. That helps us, and hosting the Olympics helps cement that. But I don't think that should be the only principle as we plan the waterfront.
So what you're now finishing the second year of your second term, and it's that funny time because it was the turn of the decade, so you had to run two-year terms. You're now running for your third term, but this one is going to be 4 years.
Yeah, that's right. So in simple,
I must say I was reconsidering my support of term limits the other day because it is too short. I mean, if they're going to be term limits, I think they should be 3 terms, 3 4-year terms. I think this is a little short.
Look, I voted against term limits when they were on the ballot as a voter. It is too short. And it does a lot of things. First of all, look, I'd worked in government before. I think I've been able to be pretty effective even from the beginning. But even for me, it takes time just to get up to speed and to be able to start functioning on all cylinders. It's also not good for the institution, the city council as a body, to have everyone know that they're here for a very short period of time, because then you don't have people that are
well, maybe
ready
we should
to build.
Put pass and fail. I mean, there are people who rate the performances of the members of the council. I voted for term limits, and I don't know if I would anymore, but because I was so thoroughly disgusted with the city council, spending 12 years there and seeing the people who were there for a long time and knowing that they were going to stay there for as long as they wanted to, because it's the inability of insurgents to defeat incumbents. But now they're gone. But maybe there should be some performance levels that you have a competition. So maybe that would instill a spirit.
Look, that's elections.
Facetious, but
I know, but that's what elections do. But you are right. The reality is it's very hard to defeat incumbent legislators, and so I understand the impetus behind term limits. 8 years is, I think,
too short
a short time, not just for the individuals, but for the body, because it means there aren't people with a long-term view that are building their career in the institution.
But there never are. We're just talking about the budget.
Yeah.
How you're now in the process of considering the mayor's final proposal for the budget, which is how much money did you say? The total
$49 billion with a B.
$49 billion. We have no glaring gap in the budget, which means it's a balanced budget. Everybody agrees to that, the council and the mayor, right?
Right.
But it's an extravagant budget, and it bodes not well for the future.
It doesn't. I agree with you in terms of the future.
But that is the point I was trying to make, is that politicians increasingly, they don't think of the future. I mean, they think of their existence, right? So that's why you borrow, and that's why, as you were saying before, the interest costs that the city pays are so high. It's because it's so hard to develop that instinct for future planning in the government. How do we go about doing that?
I like your point about borrowing. That's I think the most glaring example of what you're talking about, which is it's very hard, I think, for politicians to resist the short-term benefit of cutting a ribbon at a new playground or a spruced-up playground, even though there's the long-term costs that you're going to be paying for that over the next 30 years. And the truth is, we've gone way, way out on a limb in terms of our borrowing as a city. New York City is the 4th largest borrower in the whole country, after New York State and California and Nassau County. Now, that's just not sustainable in the long run. And the truth is, we now, when the economy is relatively good, for a lot of folks still struggling, but in terms of overall dollars being generated in the city, this is a good year. Now's the time when you say, okay, we're going to plan for the future. We should be paying down some of our debt rather than adding to it. The truth is, having a separate part of the budget which is financed only by borrowing to the tune of, in the last couple of years, $8-9 billion a year borrowed, that's just not a good way to do it.
Now, where does that money, is that the capital budget
The
that you're
capital
talking about?
budget, yep. You know, each of the last...
So all the different things that we want for the subways and things like that, does that come from the city? That's state?
the city
Some
has
of it,
kicked in some.
But not enough.
No,
Right.
and that's, you know,
Then that's
those
another
are the
part of the
priorities.
bad planning.
I mean, no, look, for the I think you could separate out something like a transit system and say, okay, we're going to borrow there because it's against the fare box. We have a stream of revenue. But we do, most of the borrowing is for things like parks, which are valuable. Believe me,
Yeah.
I
We
want my
always
constituents
want
to
them.
have good parks. But if you do it where each year you pay for what you're building, then that builds in a constraint where you do you do only what you really can afford.
That's what we call pay as you go.
We should be shifting, I think, much more of the budget to pay as you go.
And but school construction is part of this.
School construction is the same thing, quite honestly. That again, that should be pay as you go because we're not getting a stream of revenue that we know is going to pay it off. And look, I have to say I'm a little surprised at Mayor Bloomberg in this respect because coming from the business background, I thought he would be a little tighter on the city budget, and you just are not seeing that.
But he's a politician.
Well, he's running. He needs to be elected. That's true.
When you talk about, is his plan for $400 rebate in this budget?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Again, I'd rather see us pay off the debt than.
So how do you? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What would be a plan for paying off the debt, or for increasing? I mean, is this a time to really cut taxes?
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Look, we did. The mayor called for a really large tax increase in 2002, which the city needed, and so I think he feels like he wants to reduce that some now. A $400 rebate that goes to a fraction of the taxpayers, but by no means all of them. In fact, not most of them. I think that's more of a symbolic thing to do, quite honestly. It's about 250 million. Yeah, 240 something.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, for us to say 250 million is so little, but it is.
No, it's genuine money, but it's not.
It's not when you get it.
Repealing the tax
right.
increase.
It's not
more
restructuring the
than
property
real.
tax system.
No.
It's not doing anything fundamental. It's
No.
just handing off. Right?
Yeah.
So, is there ever any discussion about fundamental changes that are really going to change the way we do it?
The last couple of years, I think the city government was so overwhelmed by the aftermath of September 11th.
Yeah. Right.
Myself too. I mean, I think we all were. That we weren't able to say, we've got some fundamental long-term structural problems that we have to address in order if we're going to be responsible city
But you also
servants.
have only been in the office 4 years since
Yeah.
September 11th, so you don't know if that's common or if that's particular to September 11th.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think that now is the time that
Yeah.
we really need to be. And I'll tell you this: I don't see these issues being raised in the mayoral race.
Right,
I mean,
not.
Mayor Bloomberg is running as I've helped the city come back from September 11th. That's the entirety of the campaign, and to tell you the truth, the opponents so far, the biggest issue they're raising is whether to build a West Side Stadium or not. Now, I personally have some doubts about the West Side Stadium, but that's not the fundamental. The fundamental issues for the city over the next 4 years are much deeper than that.
When you've been an advocate, you've been a policy analyst or framer of policy outside the government. Now you're a legislator inside the government. There's a difference, isn't there?
Sure.
There's much more, in a funny way, there's much more ability to talk about policy and think about it in detail when you're outside than when you're in.
Well, that's true. Look, and I mean, I'll be honest. When I talk about paying off the debt and
Yeah.
being more responsible, some of that would require some difficult things. I mean, doing things like police protection, fire protection, garbage collection, the basic services doing those things more cheaply. Nobody wants to hear that. So it is true that when you, as politicians stand for election, the incentives to just avoid the difficult questions are very powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah. So the big race in the future in the council now would be who's going to be the speaker, because the speaker sort of frames a lot of the policies that the council then debates and tries to solve. Are you a participant in that?
Well, I want to make sure that the next speaker is going to push the council more in the Ronnie Eldridge model of open debate, aggressive, oversight by committees, and not have the process be so centralized as is today. I don't think you get good government when you have the speaker of the council makes all decisions and then all the votes are 50-0, lockstep behind them. That doesn't make sense. We should have amendments. Let's allow council members to offer amendments on the floor and debate them. And if they pass, they pass. If not, then that's not what people want.
When we were watching in Washington the recent debate on the filibuster and then the Bolton nomination, they talked about the speaker's will. I mean, what's the term they use when it's a party vote? I mean,
yes,
I haven't noticed them talk about that much, but that's what happens, is the speaker determines what the position of the majority party is going to be. Now, have you thought about how you could reorganize the council?
Absolutely.
I think we've had this discussion before.
We have, and I've organized some of my colleagues to put out a specific reform proposal that includes things like offering floor amendments, includes things like having committee chairs hire the committee staff, so that, for example,
so you're working with somebody that's working with you.
So, and that gives people the freedom to, and the ability to develop ideas apart from whatever the speaker's agenda is, because the speaker's agenda is necessarily going to be limited and kind of conservative, not in a liberal conservative way, but just status quo oriented.
Conciliatory, to keep everybody together, right?
Because that's who a speaker is going to be.
Do you give any thought to how the speaker gets selected?
Well, I don't know.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Well, I'm just saying I don't know what the choices are there. Look, it's got to be elected by the membership. I don't see any way other than that. And I think that here you have now council members have been working together for almost 4 years that know each other. I think that we'll be better able than we were 4 years ago when we were all new. This gets back a little bit to term limits.
Right.
Better able than we were 4 years ago to really understand how we want the body to function. And if we vote not for change, well, a pox on our house.
What percentage of the members vote independently, do you think, or would vote independently on something like the speaker?
Look,
that's a good question.
It is. I think most of the council members have their own independent opinion will play some role in their decision-making process. Obviously, there are outside constituencies. Look, for myself, I report to 160,000 residents of my council district, and I want to take that into account. No, but I'm saying, you're I think saying to what extent will unions and party organizations play a role? I'm sure that they will play some role.
But the party organizations seem to me to be kind of in disarray in almost every borough, which is what's so interesting.
Some more than others.
Yeah. But have you ever thought of having a speaker elected citywide? I mean, people talk about the public advocate, that's a silly job. Why isn't the speaker elected citywide? And then, do you think I don't think it would be an inability to manage the council if you were voted citywide. You think so?
Well, it used to be called city council president, and didn't play that role. Right. But I think, I would want to think about that. But I will tell you that
next time you come, we can talk about it.
I will, but I'll tell you my initial reaction is that a parliamentary body, a legislature, whatever legislature, it does need to organize itself. Not that means everyone's supposed to follow lockstep. Here's the difference between Congress, because we're talking about party votes. In Congress, sure, the party leadership tries to control its members, but the two sides are close enough, the Republicans and Democrats are close enough in number, that there's still accountability, that that now the Republicans are in the majority. To me, that's unfortunate. But if the Democrats have a good idea, the Republicans are going to have to work pretty hard to keep all their members in line. And the truth is, they're going to have to respond to that idea in some way or another. So that there's a built-in way to get issues on the agenda. I'm not saying that the minority or any individual legislator has a right to get their ideas enacted. They just have a right to get the ideas heard and listened to, and then have some accountability that people have to vote for.
But even if you're in the same party as the speaker, you frequently can't get your ideas to be heard.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Now, we have about a minute left, and I want to know, you said that housing was one of the most important issues in the city. What else do you rank up there?
Schools, without question.
And do you think that the schools have improved?
I do. You know what? I think we're moving in the right direction. I really do. Just based on the schools I see in my own council district. Third thing, though, I want to raise is environment, because, you know, people, particularly at the local level, don't really focus on it. We've got to start taking responsibility, even here as a city government, for doing what we can environmentally on things like clean air. You know, as global warming becomes more and more a reality.
Obvious, right.
You know, a little thing, I propose take all the taxis, let's have them be hybrids or compressed natural gas cars, which 13,000 cars running 24 hours a day, that actually is a material thing to do. You know, we as a city government have got to start taking more responsibility for the environment.
And you've taken an activist position in the Newtown Creek thing. I've read. I thought that was a very interesting thing. I remember I worked at the Port Authority when in 80?
Yeah, when they first discovered
the seepage from all the stuff.
The spill. Yep,
right, but it wasn't the first time they discovered it.
Well, you know, the spill had been underground since 1950, but that's when it first started seeping out, into the waterways.
So we have come to the end of this half hour. It hasn't been long enough, but thank you for coming, and I hope you'll come back and we can discuss some of these questions again.
Thank you, Ronnie. Anytime.